Hello and welcome to the live stream. We have an interesting agenda today, so we're going to start off with Tridion tips. I've gotten into the habit of making a new tip every single month, and then we're going to have a panel discussion. And in the panel discussion, we're going to have some guests from content services. So these are people who can actually help you with your content and not just translation. So to kick it off, though, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at a short video that I created about how Tridion works with Trados Enterprise. And I'm going to focus on going into the Trados Enterprise platform. So, here with that, let's get that one started.
This is Greg Gutman for this edition of Tridion Tips. What I want to do is I want to go through how Tridion works with Trados Enterprise. I know in a lot of my demonstrations I just use machine translation, and you don't really get a good glimpse into what's going on with Trados Enterprise behind the scenes. So let's change that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a translation process, and this is a process where Tridion Sites is going to hand a translation over to Trados Enterprise, and then Trados Enterprise is going to take the ball and is going to do the translation. I'll show you the insides of Trados Enterprise as well. But first, let's take a quick look at some of the translation processes that we have. So it's important to know that with Tridion, if there's components that don't need to be translated, we won't send them off to Trados Enterprise. We're always trying to keep the costs down and make sure that you're not translating things that don't need to be translated. Once the component is received by Trados Enterprise, it's going to be matched against all the content that's in the translation memory. Now, the translation memory is important because oftentimes companies will be repeating the same phrase. The same phrase might exist in different areas of their website, or maybe the same thing that's in a Word document is going to be published onto the website. So it makes a lot of sense to use things that have already been translated as an automatic translation for future translations. Once we figure out like what the delta is, what new stuff needs to be translated, we're going to have machine translation do a first pass, and then I'm going to show how a human translator can then do a post edit on this. So let's get going. So in our example, of course, it is the solar panel example. This is the one that we show all the time. We're going to send this content off to translation, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push the easy button. And here, and I'll call this translation tips. All right. If I take a look at the different content, let's just do this in French. You'll notice over here, so typically in my demonstrations, I do machine translation, but now let's do something different. Let's do translation and review. So from here, I'm going to be able to simply press the send to translation, and then I'll show you what things are going to look like on the other side, inside of Trados. So I'll show you the experience of what a translator would see. So we've successfully created this translation job over here. I can always open up the translation jobs, so all the things that have been sent out by Tridion within here, so you can see all the different statuses. And then I can go back and I can take a look at how things are looking at on the Trados side of things. So let me open up Trados over here. And so from Trados, we can take a look at the projects, and you can see that already my translation tips project that's coming in from Tridion is available. So it's important to note that, when you're a content author, you never have to leave Tridion. Trados is here just for the translators and the translation managers. And what we can go do is we can go into this project that has been created by Tridion, and then we can take a look at, okay, hey, what is what are the different stages? You'll notice that we've got a tab over here called workflow. And if we go into it, you'll see that there's all these different steps that happen with the translation process. And these are configurable steps. And this is something that's very powerful within Trados, is that you don't always have to follow the same type of translation pattern. There might be some types of lookups, there might be some review processes, etc., that you want to incorporate in. That can all be done through setting up different translation workflows. Now, getting back to the translation itself, itself, if I look at this translation, you'll notice that it is here and that it is available, and I can open this up in the online editor. If I have Trados Studio loaded up onto my machine, I could also open it up in Trados Studio. But for simplicity, let's just use the online editor as opposed to the desktop editor. So from here, you can see that it's done the translation, and you can see that we've got a number of spots over here where it says NMT, which is neural machine translation. So there's a lot of translation that's gone ahead. And really, if I'm a translator, from this split screen, it's more of a verification process than it is to create anything new. So as a translator, I can go in and say, hey, this all looks great. Let's accept this. Let's accept this task. Once and as I'm accepting it, that means that now I can start to make some changes if I want to. I won't make any changes. I'm just going to say complete, and then said, and I'll say all done, and maybe I'll say the machine did it. All right, so complete the task. And so now, what's going to happen is that this translation is going to continue through the different kinds of stages, and it's going to be available from within Tridion as soon as the final processing is done. And if we can even take a look at the process over here, and you can see that this is in progress. So as it's getting finalized and as the translation memory is getting updated, it will eventually come and it'll state that this is now up to date. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go into the activities, and I'm going to take a look and see, all right, here is the new translation that I have. So this is the translation review. So within Tridion, I also have the capability of taking a look at the translation as it's come through. So this is the translation which is coming back from Trados. I can then choose to edit it, and from within edit, I'm going to be prompted to do the review. So I can start this activity. I can review the translation here within the context of Tridion. And then when I say finish, I can say, okay, looks good. And then this is how I can communicate back to the translator and say, all right, this is great. This looks good. And so from there, I've illustrated not only how we send the translations off to Trados Enterprise, but then I also talk about how it can come back and how within Tridion you can approve and say, hey, this translation looks good. If I wanted to, I could also reject the translation. And what's nice is I never had to leave Tridion. So thank you very much, and this has been your translation tip.
All right. So with that, let me introduce our panel. We've got a couple of extra guests on here. So now we've got everyone. So we've got Alvin, who everybody knows. We've got Stuart, and we've got Andy. Stuart and Andy come from the content services side of the organization. But first, I just want to recap like a couple of really important points that we have with that I made in that video. So the first thing is that when you were in Tridion, you never had to go into Trados Enterprise. There was this whole handoff that happened, which is a very nice thing, and because people can stay in the tools that are important to them, and there was an integrated workflow that happened between the handing off of the translation and getting into Trados Enterprise, and then coming back and improving the translation within Tridion. So that makes a lot of sense, and hopefully a lot of organizations are thinking about expanding their global footprint and doing more translations. I know a lot of companies are only doing like 5 or 6 languages, but we've got a very efficient process. So hopefully people can start to think about doing more than that. And in terms of making sense, I think that this really ties in with our next guests, Andy and Stuart, around what we can do with content services and how it's not just about like translating content, but it's also around like creating new relevant content. So Andy and Stuart, welcome.
Thank you, Greg.
So I understand that within RWS we've got a lot of different groups, and I think that the content services group is one that could be extremely helpful just in terms of helping customers with some of their campaigns, helping them with some new types of content to create, helping them sort of expand how they're interacting with their audiences, and really filling in a lot of gaps that companies have. So in terms of your team, etc., like how do you guys go about assessing the content needs and proposing new content projects for customers?
So, I mean, quite often as RWS, we're used to dealing with the content as it goes downstream. So when it's from the point it's ready and it's a piece of English content to make it relevant globally. Our team is the part that potentially works that little bit further nearer the source. And for clients who don't have the internal capacity or who don't have the confidence to create the content at source, we can help. We can help both with creating the content through our team of writers, or through polishing the content to make sure that when it reaches the linguists, it's optimized and it's of the right quality, that the translation is then an efficient process.
Well, that sounds great. And one thing, it's kind of funny because for a lot of our customers, SEO is top of mind, and sometimes people like hire these SEO agencies, and it's like they just stuff the content in with all sorts of words, and then they kind of cross their fingers, hoping that
Mm.
they're going to get better hits. Can your team also just help not with like stuffing words, but just with more around like the I guess the organic SEO positioning, like how do you strategically think about your content in order to optimize it for the search engines?
Um, yeah, and Stuart, I don't know whether you want to say anything or you want to
Yes, so there are two aspects to that. There's the original source language SEO, and then the translation SEO. So the source content team will work often with agencies, our clients' agencies, and with the SEO experts in the country of the source language to work through their strategy, analyze keywords, analyze competitors' rankings, and make suggestions for how content can be created or updated, and make sure that the relevant keywords are incorporated appropriately. But also there are other aspects like links to other sites, um, uh, other pieces of content, and that sort of regular update that keeps the source visible in organic searches. But also on the translation side, so you showed translation
Yeah,
there, Greg. It's important because those keywords in the source language don't necessarily map to
right.
keywords in the target markets,
Absolutely.
and so we have SEO experts in each target market who will investigate those keywords and make sure that when we produce our translations, they can then be edited and with the relevant keywords associated for each target market in the translation.
That's an excellent point. And yeah, for a lot of our customers, that global SEO approach is becoming increasingly important. Thus far, a lot of people have been just focused on, how do things work in English in the US or maybe the
Mm.
UK, etc. So I think that's really, really important. So Alvin, we've got Blueprinting 3.0 that's coming up in the 10.1 release, and like my thought is it's going to be pretty wild because people are going to be able to update their content models, and while they're updating their content models, I think that there's also some gaps that will be identified with the content themselves, and maybe there's sort of an updated content strategy that people should be
Yeah.
thinking about on top of the modeling. I just want to see if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, one of the big problems, especially with writing, like say microcopy, little tiny pieces of content and translation is context. So we get to a point where you're because currently in Tridion sites, it's you can share whole components and you localize the whole component or not. What tends to happen is you have smaller pieces of content, and that could be a challenge both when you're writing and also when you send for translation. So in the new approach with the next version of blueprinting, you can put more content, more context into the same piece of component, chunk of content, and then that can help with writing. So when you write your content, you have the context, you have more of an article and all the pieces related to it, even things that aren't translated. And when you send and retrieve them for translation, they can come over with the context to help the translators, rather than little tiny pieces of components that are all separated because you're trying to manage these IDs and whatnot. One question I had on the content side for our content services, Stuart, is what are there particular kinds of problems we like to solve? Like a customer comes to you and they say, we have this problem. What kinds of problems would be a good fit, or do we love solving for customers? Problems that maybe that they don't realize they have, and challenges and whatnot.
Okay, one element might be, if they're going multilingual, is to make sure that their content is appropriate in the source language for translation, or easy for translation. So if some content is written in a way that's very culturally specific for the source language market, perhaps they've written it that way without realizing it. That makes it tricky to translate. That might be part of the strategy. So you maybe want very hyper local content. So you create content in the source language, and then you recreate it in the target markets as well. But for other content, it may just really need to be standardized across all languages. So one of the services that we offer, if we're not creating content from scratch, is to re-edit the content, or to look at the content from a multilingual, from a global market perspective.
Is that transcreation? Is that the right?
So yes, I mean, transcreation is a word that's much abused and means many things to many people.
Yeah.
I would call it marketing translation. Transcreation for me is actually almost recreating the language in another market. And a typical transcreation process, perhaps for taglines and things like that, we would typically produce 3 different versions of the source language, translate it back into the original language, so that the original requester could see the kind of the nuances of the different versions of the translations, and have the marketing people then select one of those 3. So you might have 3 different kind of levels of wildness of translation. Make something further away, and then describe also. The linguist would also describe what these different versions convey and how they're different as they move further away from the source. So that's what I would call transcreation. Marketing translation is taking some regular translation and making it appropriate for the market in a less extreme, creative kind of way.
Okay.
But that's also called transcreation by some people as well.
I see. Which is a nice fit with Tridion sites, because from the Tridion product perspective, we say localization, but the system's actually agnostic of the kind of localization.
Right.
So we can handle both market localization, that this is content for specific regions, and independent of that, the translation of the words and the content. So just like more direct translation, or even marketing localization, what we're talking about here.
And I mean, just sort of adding to that point, there's probably 2 main drivers of that sort of adaptation that we've seen, and even thinking 2 clients this week who we've dealt with. One might be that the relevance that Stuart's touched on, where it could be that one has that hyperlocal, the jargon that works in one country and one country only, that needs to then be adapted. But the other one, which really does sort of has financial and reputational risk attached to it, is the compliance issue, and ensuring that content that might be perfectly neutral in one language or in one market may not be compliant in another. So we do help our clients then in that respect of making sure that when we create content, it's safe to publish in the target market.
Yeah.
One example, just to prove that we've tried to stop calling our translators now, and we're calling them language specialists. And one aspect that really brought it home to me was something very simple as maybe describing a hotel. You say it's a hotel on the side of a river, river. Sounds very straightforward in English. Yet in French people distinguish between a river that flows into a lake and a river that flows into a sea.
Right.
And if you're describing that hotel beside of a river, you have to use the right French translation of fleuve or rivière, depending on where that. So the linguist also then not just has to translate the word, but actually go and look up and see, where is this hotel? What's the body of water it's next to? Let me follow on maps where this body of water is going down to, and then translate it appropriately. That's a lot more than just translation for a simple word that just sounds very simple in English. So it's far more than just translating, putting one word into another word. There's a lot of subject matter expertise and understanding that goes into producing multilingual copy.
That is a great example. Thank you, Stuart. So we're going to wrap up the live stream. So I wanted to let everybody know that the content services is available like now. So if you're interested, please engage your account representative at RWS. I also want to say that I think we're going to do some more things with you, Stuart, and Andy, as we get a little bit further along with the 10.1 release, because I think that this should be a nice solution that we should explain to people in the context of, not just improving the content model with Blueprint 3.0 for the 10.1 release, but then also how we can improve things on the translation and the content services side, along with SEO too. So I think there's a lot of synergy between the release that we're coming up with in November. So 10.1 is coming up in November, and we've got some features that tie in very nicely to the work that Stuart and Andy's team is doing. And I guess you were busy with a couple companies last week. I'm sure you guys are busy with many more next week. So if you're interested, please go ahead and book some time with your rep to talk about some of the things that you could do to improve the content on your website. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, panel. And we will talk next month.
Thank you.
Cheers, thank you.